Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, I bid you welcome on this beautiful Sunday morning. I hope everyone is doing well. Yesterday was a great day as well. Saturday, a big day in college football here in the United States. I was happy to see the Nebraska Cornhuskers defeat the University of Colorado. Now, what's interesting, and I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, that game really shows you an example of what happens when you have a football team playing against a team of individuals. Look, the Deion Sanders, aka Coach Prime era, is really centered on his kids, Shiloh Sanders and Sador Sanders. Probably got that first name wrong a little bit, but whatever. and Travis Hunter. So essentially, the football team at the University of Colorado is based around really three players to showcase the talents of three players. Whereas on the other side, the University of Nebraska, you have an actual football team where individualism isn't moved to the forefront. And I think that game really kind of showed you what happens when a football team plays a group of individuals. And then compounding that, I really can't stand the University of Colorado. It's a far left, insanely left-wing university. I had one of my children actually graduated from the University of Colorado. And unfortunately, I had the opportunity during the COVID scare, I had the opportunity to sit in via the video coursework that the University of Colorado provided. They canceled their in-school classes, and the kids were forced to basically take classes online. And not only that, the University of Colorado still mandated that they get the jab. They get the jab, even to attend online classes. Yeah. But more importantly, watching some of those classes, particularly the criminal justice program. Oh my Lord, I don't even know or understand how the University of Colorado is getting away with some of the stuff that it is teaching. It is revisionist history. It is not what happens in the real world, and it's all focused on social justice and just this just left-wing quackery. It's quackery is what they're teaching at CU. Now look, maybe their medical program, maybe their law program is a little more factual, but outside of that, hopefully their engineering program. But everything else is just this your force-fed social justice and just this insanity that's going on. And again, just happy Nebraska beat the crap out of Colorado yesterday. Anyway, all right, so on to the program. The war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine continues. And as we speak, Iranian ballistic missiles have arrived. Hundreds of precision-guided Iranian ballistic missiles have arrived inside of Russia. Now, I got to say, I'm somewhat surprised that the Russians are needing these systems from the Iranians. Now, what we also understand is that these are some very good systems that the Iranians have developed. Now, how did the Iranians get to a point where they are probably on par with the Russian Federation in terms of these long-range missile systems? When I mean long-range, I'm talking systems that extend outwards to 70 to 150 kilometers. In some cases, many more. Well, the Iranians fought a war, and that war was the Iran-Iraq War that lasted from 1980 until 1988. 1980 to 1988. And during that war, there was something called the War of the Cities. And in the War of the Cities, the Iraqis were firing ballistic missiles, Scud missiles, other systems, towards Iranian cities. And in return, the Iranians launched missiles towards Baghdad as well. So you had this period of time where large parts of Tehran had evacuated. They left the city and took to the countryside because of the deluge of Iraqi ballistic missiles that were hitting some of these cities. Now, because of this missile war, the Iranians decided that they were going to need to create its own defense industry that really specialized in the manufacturing of these long-range ballistic missiles. So after the Iran-Iraq War, the Iranians spent great amount of resources in developing these systems. So obviously over the decades, and the Russians also gave the Iranians technology, as did the North Koreans. But a lot of what the Iranians have done with these various missile systems that are now just not going to eventually plague the Ukrainians, but are also plaguing the Israelis. They are causing issue in the Red Sea with the Houthis in Yemen possessing these systems. And again, hundreds of these systems have now been transferred to Russia, and in all probability will be used, if not already have been used. So again, kind of surprising that the Russians do need this assistance in terms of this what you would call basically a secondary manufacturing base. Obviously, the Russians have used the drone systems that the Iranians have produced as well. Now, again, the Russians are playing catch-up in terms of drone technology, maybe not necessarily ballistic missile technology, but I don't think the Russians had produced the amount of Iskander ballistic missiles that they actually understood that they were going to have to use in a major conflict. And this happens quite often in war. In World War I, for instance, the amount of artillery that was being used far exceeded the amount of artillery that was actually being produced early on in the conflict. And until the U.S. manufacturing capability picked up and started providing these weapon systems or these munitions to the Western European allies, it was tough. And the same thing is happening in this conflict now, the Russian-Ukrainian war. Munitions are being expended at a much higher rate than anyone kind of going into this conflict would have suspected. The amount of ammunition that the Russians are expending is being used in a manner in which you would have probably seen the Third World War. The Third World War being utilized. That's how much munitions the Russians are expending, as are the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians are being directly supported by a host of Western European nation states. So it's interesting to see that the United States becomes very angry with these other nation states that are supplying munitions to the Russians. North Korea, Iran, what have you, probably a host of other nations as well. But on the flip side of the coin, the U.S., the Western European allies, the South Koreans are all providing these weapon systems to the Ukrainians. If not for these Western Europeans and the United States, the Ukrainians would have already lost this war. It would be over with. But the supplies continue, as do the supplies now of ballistic missiles from the Iranians. And we anticipate this will continue for some time. Hundreds, if not thousands, of ballistic and semi-ballistic missile systems will be shipped to the Russians to be used in this conflict. So this is World War by proxy. You have the Russians actively being supported by the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, possibly other nation states, the Ukrainians being supported by all of Western Europe, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Spain, Italy, Poland, the Czech Republic. So it's just going to continue. It's going to continue until the Russians break the Ukrainians. And I think right now that is the goal. I think the Russians, as I close out this piece of content, the Russians firmly believe that there is no other choice but to seek the total capitulation and defeat of the Volodymyr Zelensky globalist regime that is in Kiev. And look, I have to call it a regime simply because they have suspended the democratic process, right? The Ukrainians are no longer having the opportunity to elect a new president. So if the Ukrainians had decided that they no longer wanted to keep Volodymyr Zelensky in power, right now there's no way for the Ukrainian people to use the power of the voting box to remove Volodymyr Zelensky. The Constitution has been suspended, as is elections. So that's kind of where we sit. So more to come. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Have a lovely Sunday, and we will talk again soon. Have a good day.